Staying on the topic of defense, I can definitely remember thinking, and Dan, you and I have probably talked about this. I know I've written about it. In the early Fox years, him to me projecting as a massively disruptive defensive weapon. I just thought that physically, athletically, the way he could jump passing lanes, his length, his quickness, and maybe you correct me, but I do feel like there were periods there where it was almost the expectation that this guy, at least tools wise, was going to be an amazing defensive guard. And now it's at the point where he's so good that it's almost and his importance to the offense is such that like we don't really ask about why Damian Lillard and why John Morant aren't shutting down everybody they go up against, because they got other things to worry about. And Fox, I think, is there. But do you see him as someone that, is it just a workload thing? Is it a why? I guess the short question is, why is he not the kind of, dominant defensive piece that, his physical ability seems to suggest he could be?
And we actually noticed a big difference last season. Still not, from buzzer to buzzer, not a great defender, but especially in fourth quarters, he would really engage, and he used those tools exactly like we always thought he could, right? And I think a big reason we never saw it before was, frankly, look at the situation he was in.
Right.
Like, who's going to kill themselves for defense for as bad a teams as they were? Like, but Mike Brown, when he showed up, like, he did it in like his opening press conference. He called out that De'Aaron Fox needed to be a better defender. Like, and he got Fox to buy in from day one. And we definitely saw him improve. And that was a big part of what made the team as a whole better in that Warrior series, was that Fox was engaged a lot more. Now, from a workload perspective, I don't think it's realistic to expect that, throughout the course of an 82 game season, all four quarters or anything like that. I think he could probably be a little bit better than he was, especially kind of earlier in games. Like, don't give up the easy stuff early and you don't have to do the hard stuff later. But, we definitely saw him more engaged and make some really incredible defensive plays, especially late in games, especially close games. And then in the playoffs, he was playing really good defense a lot of the time.
Yeah.
Definitely room for growth, but I think he's such a huge part of their offense, especially their fourth quarter offense, that part of it at this point is just kind of saving him to where he still has something in the tank for that.
Is that like, insofar as there is a next frontier for him, is that like the next frontier for him just based on everything he already does on offense? And I would agree. Like, I think he got better, or at least, I felt him more on defense watching the show. Like, he didn't feel like he was just kind of stiff, rigid, upright a lot of the time. And so that clearly went a long way. But like, what does the next frontier look like for a player who's entering year 7? But it kind of just feels like he only just turned the corner, because you and I have talked year in, year out about how he's like faded, like, or started poor and then finished strong, or vice versa.
Yeah, I mean, last year was the first time he had a great year from start to finish, right? Yeah. Like he hasn't done that before in his career. It's always been broken in the thirds, where he'd have like a terrible third of the year, a great third of the year, and a meh third of the year. And you never knew where in the year those three sections were going to be. It was always different. But last year, he really put it all together with consistency. I do think consistency on the defensive end is the more likely way for him to improve. I mean, obviously, more consistency on the outside shot. He wasn't bad. He was respectable from deep last year, which is huge with a guy with his speed and everything. But I'm less concerned with that, just because the way that he is able to use kind of the stop and pop mid-range and, get to the rim and all that. It's like, all right, if you're doing those two things at that elite level, you don't necessarily need to have the 3-point shot, because, that mid-range pull-up is enough to keep the defenses from just sitting in the paint, and, he can pick them apart if they're doing that. So it'd be nice if he could consistently hit threes, but I think
that was on step backs. He's at like 39% the past 2 seasons on step back threes. It's wild.
But I definitely think that being more engaged all season long on defense would be big, and not just for him as a player taking the next step, but for the Kings as a whole, right? I mean, he's the guy. Him and Sabonis are setting the tone, and Sabonis doesn't have the skills to become a really great defender. Fox does. Whether that's the best use of his energy, who knows? But if he could do that with a little bit more consistency, I think it does kind of set the tone a little bit more for the team. And then, maybe that's where we see that improvement to where they're no longer a bottom 5 defense.